I can't remember which camera I'm on. Hello, everybody. I hope you can see me, and I really hope you can hear me. I think I've got things fixed. Just 2 seconds. Sorry about this. I've had such a nightmare setting up today. Just trying to make sure I can see. Everybody's been doing their block-ins. Oh, right. Yeah, it does happen. Hopefully you're all ready and raring to go with this new subject now. So I'll just take you really quickly through how I've got this set up. I've got a printout here, and I've got a 6 by 7 inch rectangle drawn out here. Is the video very dark? Is it me, or it's very dark, isn't it? I'll try and bring this camera's exposure up a little bit so you can see a bit better. I've got just the rough shapes of the eggs put in, and just the main kind of lines of the cat wanting in. Everything is happening today. Come on then, little man. I know. The main shapes of the cloth put in. So we're going to try. My goal for today is to get as much of this egg on the far right. I know. What do you want? What do you want? Can't help you if you get your claws stuck. Get the first egg mostly roughed in terms of the values, and start doing some of the blending, although obviously the gradation on these eggs is so fine. If you want to get really close, it takes a long time to get it right. And also to begin on this area of the cloth here and start roughing that in too. So there won't be anything that you haven't already done at least once in the lemon drawings. And for a lot of you, many times in the lemon drawings. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to practice the stuff a little bit that we talked about in the critique session last week, especially the values and the gradation. That's really going to be key now, because we're pushing the gradation, the fineness of the gradation up to really, I mean, frankly, if you can draw an egg with this method, there isn't very much you can't do. If you can get the form of the egg, because they're very, very tricky to get. So if you find this a struggle at first, don't be too discouraged. Stick at it, and I'm sure you will get there. I'm going to switch over to the camera that's closer. Betty, it doesn't actually matter if you use, I mean, this is Canson Métion, which I recommended that you use. I've got the rough side, but the smooth side is just as good, if not better. No, you don't have to use toned paper. I think in some ways it helps if it's like a lightish value, like this is in Munsell terms probably about 6 or a 7. About a 7. It helps because you have something to work against when you're putting the values down. But as long as your paper has plenty of tooth, we'll be completely covering the paper anyway. So if you're working on white paper, that's fine, as long as it has a decent tooth and is something like the Canson Métion paper, then you will be fine. Oh yes, I keep meaning to say that every time. Thanks for reminding me, Susan. Every time I do a video, I keep meaning to say that, and 9 times out of 10 I forget. But if you hover over the bottom right of your video, there's a little gear icon, and YouTube will often. What is it, little man? Have you got your claws stuck again? Well, don't claw that up then. I know. There's a little gear icon, and YouTube tends to put the default on as really low resolution. So you want to click on that and up it to 1080, because I stream at 1080, which is very high resolution. So about as high as I can get with the bandwidth that I've got here. So that will give you a much better picture. So let's switch over to the image, the camera that's closer on the drawing. I'm going to move this over so it's lined up a little bit better. I must have knocked the camera while I was setting up. So Jinya says, shouldn't the background gradations be done first, like in paintings, then the eggs, cutting into the background? It's harder to do the background after the egg. No, because in this method, it doesn't really matter where you start, because we're not relating values to anything else so much, because we have absolute values with the Munsell scale that we're going to use. And with this method, it's not like painting that we're cutting into things. We're actually just going to be drawing up to the edge, you know, and if we want to soften an edge, then we work across it with the charcoal. So this is not quite like paint. In a lot of ways, you have a lot more control, and it's a much slower process doing this than doing it with paint. So if I was painting, yes, certainly I would do the background first. But for this, it's more of almost a kind of a piecemeal approach. So I'm going to tell you the values that we need at each part of the drawing. Okay, and what I'll do is after the session today, I'll make a JPEG with some, as I did with the lemon, with some of the value numbers on in various places, so you've got a guide to go to check. But certainly for what we do today, I'm going to tell you what the values are. So the egg goes from the deepest shadow of the egg around here. That looks a bit dark as well. I might have to bring this camera up a little bit as well. The deepest shadow of the egg here is going to be, remember we're using our Munsell scale, so that's going to be like down to a value 2, really dark here. Where we get over to the light side here, it's up to like about a value 8. The cloth here is about a value 8 as well. The very lightest part of it here, where this fold is facing the light, that will be about a 9. So you can see you've got the Munsell value scale down the side here. So what we're going to be doing is very closely relating all of these values to particular parts of the drawing, and then trying to get as accurate a value as we can actually down on here through this mixing technique. So I've got the compressed charcoal here, and I've got white chalk here, white chalk lead, which will obviously go all the way in there. I kind of wish I had 2 of these clutch pencils. It would certainly make things go a little bit quicker if I did, but I only have the one. Pretty sure I did used to have 2 at one point. I've got sandpaper, of course, as well for sharpening. So make sure that you have your lead sharpened to start with, and that you keep sharpening them as you go. And putty rubber for any kind of little things that need changing. So first off, I'm going to go into a screen share, and I'm going to show you some of the values that we want to be hitting in Photoshop. Okay. Obviously, since we're working from a photo here, is this going to work? Yeah, hopefully you should be able to see my Photoshop screen now. So if I get my little color checker up and I check this deepest shadow, like the core shadow of the egg here, and then I bring this box up. So the bit that matters here is this L value, and that's 25, which basically means in terms of our Munsell scale down the side here, that's 0, 1, 2, 3. It's going to be 2.5, so between these two. So that one is 3, so it's going to be slightly darker than that. You can see it changing here. That one is the 2, it's going to be slightly lighter than that. So we can, using this scale here, we can relate the values exactly to the physical Munsell scale that we've got. So, you know, in a way there's kind of, well, it's not in a way, there is actually no reason that we shouldn't be able to hit these values exactly, as long as we can nail a value with the mixing. So the darkest part here is about 2, value 2, 2.5. The lightest part of the egg over this side, you can see that's gone up to 82 there, so that's about a value 8 there. The very highlight is about a value 9, which is about as high as we can go in chalk. Around here, behind the egg, is about 5, 5.5. Here it's about 5. Around here it's about 5.5. Okay, and the cloth directly in front of the egg, here it's about value 8. Maybe slightly above. And then here, after it goes over the fold and down, is right down to like a value 5, a value 6. Something like that, okay? So now we know pretty much the values of a lot of this area here. As we go down into our half tone here, we're about a value 3. Coming over into the light, 4.5. You can see these values change. These relate exactly to Munsell values. By the time we get round to here, we're a 6. Up here, we're going to be like a 7. Yeah, we're about a 7 here. So gradually, as we look across the surface, we can see where we need to be. Now, this really is our terminator. I would say around here is our terminator, where the egg really goes into shadow, but we have like a gentle gradation into the half tone here. Probably there is closer to the terminator. So obviously they're kind of abstract ideas more than they're actual things anyway. They're just ways to help you get into the shape. So if you start off by roughly dividing this egg shape into light and shadow, I would put it somewhere like around here. Obviously, the nice thing about this method, this way of drawing, is that we have a huge amount of control. We can edit things almost endlessly. You know, you can change in a way that you can't so much with paint. Probably the core shadows maybe a little bit further back, probably maybe about around there, something like that. Okay, so it's saying this is, generally speaking, the left side is all light and the right side is all shadow. I'm going to try, I'm probably, as I draw, I'm going to mess about with the oh, somebody at the door. I'm really sorry about this. Back on? Yeah. So I'm going to start with, we know the value we want. We know we want to be at about a value 2 at this darkest part here. And that is like around here. So I'm going to start by putting that value in, and it's a fairly small area, which is that value. And I would actually put it, if you try and draw like a similar sized shape to the shape that I'm drawing here, try and refine this curve a little bit on the back of the egg there. So in that shape, just in that shape in the shadow, we want about a value 2. So I'm going to, because I know I'm well down the values, I'm going to go in and do pretty much fill it in with the black, which will be about a value 1. And you can see the texture of the paper is starting to show through, because I'm doing a Canson paper, and this is on the rough side. I actually quite like the texture. I don't mind it so much. I'm going to try and get a decent edge and a curve on the edge of the egg there. So just kind of keying things in. So if I check that against my value scale, it's looking slightly darker than a 2. Hopefully you can see that. This is about, it's about a 1, which is where you'd expect it to be, the compressed charcoal by itself. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is take out this one. put in the white lead and go over that fairly lightly. I'm not too bothered about these two edges here because we're going to be changing those anyway and drawing up to them and across them. I'm going to try and keep a fairly neat edge at the back. So at this stage, it's a little bit like the beginning of a painting. We're trying to key in the values and make sure that they're about right. So I'm using a very light pressure with the white, and it tends to smooth out the black a little bit. Let's have a look at that. Slightly light now for a 2. So up this about a 2.5. So up maybe a 3, 2.5 to 3. So I've gone too light, so I need to go back in with the black again. So you need to be constantly checking the values. If these values wander, then the form won't work anything like as well. So I'm going back over this lightly now. So firstly, when I went over it with the black, I used a fair amount of pressure to get it covered, but everything after that point is fairly light, really. Trying to get it even. Check that. That's good. That's about a value 2 now. So now I'm very close to where I need to be. Now the value just behind this part of the egg around here, we'll do a little bit of this background value here. You need to have this little fold at the back of the cloth drawn in because we don't want to go over that because that's a fairly high value. So I'm going to put in a patch around here of, I want a value 5.5, okay? A little bit of the background, so we've got something to key against. So I'm going to start putting the black in. Lighter pressure this time, I don't want it to cover quite so heavily. And I'm refining the edge as I go from a straight line block into a little bit more of a curve. And the thing is that don't worry too much about any of this at the beginning because it's like a block-in, you know, we're just trying to get the stuff in, and the main thing to focus on is to get the values right and try and get them smooth. You can see hopefully the texture a lot more. Would it help if, I think it would probably help if I zoomed in a lot more on the drawing so you can see more closely what I'm doing, because you've all got pictures of the subject there. I'm gonna risk zooming in and refocusing the camera because I think it's gonna probably help if you can see more clearly what I'm working on here. So let's bring this up so it fills the screen. Sorry, a little bit of camera fiddling going on. That's going to be better, right? I don't think you really need to see too much of my hand. I think it's probably better if you can see this closer. I'll just check the focus. Which I need to do over here just to make sure it's in focus. So it should be, I mean, if you do check that you're watching it in HD, depending on your bandwidth, if your bandwidth is good enough, it should be you should be able to see, like, in quite a lot of detail, the strokes as they go down and the texture of the paper and all the rest of it. That's good. Okay, so remember the value we're after here in this patch is 5.5. So I'm going to go over this with white now and then check it and see where I am. And when the white goes on, it starts to mix and it starts to look a lot smoother. And if anything, I think it's going to be slightly lighter as it moves towards the right. So for the background, like over here, this value I have over here is right down to a value 2. So I've set this photo up. I actually do have a picture of the setup so I can show you. Remind me if I forget to post it in the group, I can show you how I set this still life up and how I lit it. So it's all about creating patches of light and shadow. So I want shadow here against the light part of the egg, light here against the shadow part, and the same here. You know, I want shadow here against the light part of the egg. So it's mostly about creating contrast that will show the form. So let's check and see where that is. It's actually looking like it's about, the value is about right, but it's not very smooth at the moment, so I'm going to give it another couple of layers, black and white. So a drawing like this, you know, I'm not going to make any bones about this. It's a time-consuming affair. This is a small drawing. Like most of the drawings that I've done it using this method have been fairly small, except for the iron one, which was pretty big. And the reason for that is it just takes quite a long time to cover the surface. When you think how quickly you could put this down with paint, it would be basically mix the paint and just put down a stroke. But obviously there's a lot more chance that that stroke would be wrong. This way we can spend a lot of time working slowly and really nailing the values. It's all about the values. I'm going to try and make this fairly smooth. You can see, so this is like the fourth layer. I did one layer of black, one layer of white, another layer of black, another layer of white. And there are still some little gaps, you know, but it's beginning to get that built up smoothness now. I'm beginning to cover the surface more. Let me check that value should be, I want about a 5.5. Little bit dark, so I can go in with a little bit more light, a bit more white, and bring it up slightly, light pressure. And this is smoothing it again. So this is like the 5th time I've been over this area now. And I think a lot of the problem with where the technique wasn't working so well for some people, it was because you were not putting down enough of this. So it's not a case of pressing hard. It's mostly a case of just going over it a few times until it starts to blend and you have enough on there so that the little dots in the paper, the texture of the paper, it still has an effect, but it's not so obvious now. All good. So there's a value 5, a little bit lighter. That's just about bang on 5.5. Just about where I want it to be. Okay. So let's check the value of this little area of cloth around the back here. There's the one thing I don't like about this setup is there's a fold in the cloth there that makes a dark shape. It's up to you whether you want to put that in or not. It doesn't read very well in the photo, so it probably won't read very well in a drawing. Depends how close you want to be to the photo. What you could do is ignore the dark shape and just do all of this light and then just do the cast shadow as it should be. But let's check the value there. If I go onto screen share again. I'll show you. This is basically how I would check it with the color pack. Check it out. Just check about a value 8. So immediately we're starting to, like down here, it gets slightly lighter. It's an 8. This area, still, it's all pretty much about an 8. So that would do fine. So I'm going to put down a very thin layer. Oh, someone was saying, what about putting white down first? Let's try. So if I put white down first and I put it down fairly thickly, so you can probably see the drawing board shakes a bit more when I'm pressing a bit harder. This is one of those horrible three-legged easels, and it tends to shake about quite a bit. So I put white down first. So that should be like about a value 9. Let's check it. Yeah, maybe slightly lower, probably because a bit of the lighter than an 8, about 8.5, because a bit of the paper is showing through, and the paper has a color as well, so that tends to change things a little bit. Now, I don't know about you, but I know some people have been struggling with using charcoal, but I actually find this way of putting together works more relaxing and less stressful than painting, just because I think partly because of the amount of control and the slowness of it. So I'm going to go over this with black, which is going to bring it way too low, and then I'm going to go back into it again. So this is like very light pressure now. Go back in with the white. I'm going to need to sharpen I'm losing the point on the edge of my white. You can hopefully see there. Is the picture all right for everybody? Do you let me know in the comment box if this is a good level of zoom in, or I can actually zoom in even more than this if you want me to, and it will keep the resolution, you know. The camera will, I think, can zoom in a little bit more than this if you want me to, if you want to see it like really closely. So let's check that value. It is literally just blocking in values at the moment. So we want about an 8, and I would say we're hitting that just about right. Slightly darker than the 8.5, lighter than the 7.5, just about an 8, just about bang on. Good, okay. By the way, a little tip on the sandpaper. I use these sheets like this, like fairly decent size. I fold them over, get them from a hardware shop. And when it starts to build up, I get a tub like this, and I tap off the dust. And I use one side for sharpening the black and the other side for sharpening the white, so they don't get messed up. They don't get mixed up. And this is, let's see what grit I'm using today. This is 320 actually. This is quite rough, and it's working very well for this, for the chalk and the compressed charcoal. Okay. So this value here, this 8, actually continues around here as well. So around the bottom of the egg, I want to be able to put in a value 8 as well here, and it's going to go down to about a line about here where it folds over, so the change in value shows a change of plane, and it comes back up to the cast shadow. So if I draw a line which shows the edge of the cast shadow, I know I need to come down to about here and up to about here. I'm going to start it about here and put in basically this, a patch about that big of the value 8. I'll go in with the white first. And it tends to go, the first layer or two tends to be slightly rougher, and then they get gradually more refined as you build up the layers. So it does require pressure sensitivity, which was the reason that we did this technique second instead of going straight into it straight away. But I personally think it doesn't require, because you're doing it in layers, it doesn't require as much sensitivity as just drawing with the Fusane charcoal and trying to bring it out, the values out to almost a whisper where you still have some of the paper showing, you know. I kind of feel like you can get away with a little more like this, but I set the more difficult one first so that hopefully you would all be developing quite a high level of pressure control before we got onto this. So that's that pretty covered. You can see already that's slightly lighter. Than this value here, so I want those to be about the same value. We're saving our lightest light for the little highlights on the eggs and for this fold here, because when you think about it, this plane, the light is coming down here from the left, so this plane is slightly oblique to the light. It's not directly facing the light. The only bits that are directly facing the light are the highlights on the eggs and just this edge of this fold. Those are the only bits that face the light entirely. So those bits we're saving our highest light for. So I'm going, now this is very gentle pressure, trying to keep it reasonably even. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't want any really obvious parts of this standing out. I'm just really just stroking it very lightly across. That I think, personally, I think from looking at your work that all of you are starting to develop a higher level of pressure sensitivity already, which is great to see. Then I'll go over that with the white and it will begin to mix. This is actually just what I need, is some slow, careful drawing at this point of the day. I had a slightly frenetic day. It was Michelle, my wife's birthday today. So we went out for a birthday lunch at her favourite place to eat. As some of you have been to, I think. Mariana, you've definitely been there. We went to Star Anise, little vegetarian and vegan cafe in Stroud, and they do the most amazing food. Really good soups. But as I'm sure all of you who are parents will appreciate, doing that with a boisterous 7-year-old and 11-year-old is sometimes a little bit challenging. It was fun though. And just doing kind of birthday things and frankly a little tiring, so it's nice to just ease into some drawing now. So I'm looking out for any parts of this that really show as being overly standing out as the value not matching the rest of it, you know. can refine it later, put in any extras like suggestions of folds if I want to, but for now I just want a fairly even value block, and I can see looking at it that this is pretty much the same value, but let's check it anyway. So we want to be about an 8 there. Looks pretty good. So this is the value 8 here. So this is a 7, it's definitely lighter than that. That's the 9, it's definitely darker than that. A 9.5, it's darker than that. 7.5, it's lighter than that. We were hitting just about a value 8, just about what we want there. That soup, I know. That soup is amazing though, isn't it? Today I had chili and black bean soup and it was just incredible. And Michelle had like a Thai tofu noodle broth soup, which was also amazing, with lemon and coconut. Oh. And the kids like that food too, which kind of surprises me in a way. I'm glad we've given them lots of different kinds of food when they were younger, and they're not too like, now all I eat is fish fingers and beans. Luke had the soup and Jasper had hummus and some raw veg. They did both have hot chocolate as well though. Mariana, you'll have to come and visit again and bring the family. We can all go down to Starnies. In fact, you should all come. It's worth like an 11-hour flight or something just to go for some good soup and talk about drawing and painting. Okay, so we're beginning to get values blocked in fairly well now, I think. Thanks, Mariana. I'll let you know. Sorry, I'll let Michelle know. So she got chocolates, and we have a bit of a tradition in our house that you get cake in bed for breakfast when it's your birthday. So she got some really delicious banana and berry vegan chocolate cake, some vegan carrot cake, and some pink champagne, which is a bit of a weird, and ginger tea. I know that's a bit of a weird combination, but it was like all her favourite stuff. Now, come to think of it, I didn't get any cake yet. None of which I made, I hasten to add, because I can't make vegan cakes and have them come out all right. Ah, the donuts. Yeah, the Sunday market is Saturday market is back on full force now. And also it's coming into September, so my friends Helen and Dave, who run have an apple orchard farm, traditional orchard farm. I'm going to have all of their apples appearing soon, so I'm thinking about painting apples again. I feel like would be a good idea at this point to work into the egg a little bit more. So I'm going to look for the value that we want in the reflected light down here, because we want a gradual gradation from this one, just as we had in the lemon, down into the reflected light. Now, reflected light is really, really hard to judge, okay? But looking at this, I would say it's definitely darker than this value. It's lighter than this value. I would say it's probably somewhere around the value of the background here. Just this little blush of reflected light. And there's a lot of reflected light, because when you think about it, the light is coming down here. It's hitting the cloth, and this is white cloth. So what makes something a light value or a dark value is the amount of light it reflects, the amount of light it gives back. So this, a white cloth is reflecting a lot of light. So that means there's quite a lot of light reflecting into the reflected light, into the shadow here. But let's have a quick check and see what it would actually be. Hopefully you can see my screen now. So this value back here is about 5, 5.5, something like that. And this here, let's see how close I was. It's actually a 5. So it's slightly lower, you know, slightly darker than this value back here, which is just a little bit lighter. So let's establish that by deciding on the shape of our reflected light, which I would say is something like this. And we're going to put in a value 5 there. Now, obviously, we need to be a little bit careful because we also have the cast shadow and the occlusion shadow underneath it. So immediately we're starting to think about modeling factors. So this area down here, directly under the egg, is very, very dark. Okay, that's going to be like down to a value 2. So I'm only going to bring this value down, not right to the edge of the egg. I'm going to leave a little gap between the light value that we just put down and the egg. So it's like the bottom of the egg. So this area here, which I'm putting in now, is going to be the occlusion shadow. Occlusion means no light. No light can get in there, so it's very dark. You know, that's going to be our lowest value, probably, even lower than this one. And then we come out into the cast shadow. So we'll check the value of the cast shadow in a little while. But this is all, this part of the egg is all very dark indeed. Okay, but this, so this shape here is going to be our value 5. So I'm going to go in with the black first. I think, to be honest with you, I don't think it matters very much if you start with the black or the white. Obviously, if you're doing a lighter value, it's probably better to go in with a light first, with the white first. Somewhere in the middle, I don't think it makes a lot of odds. How's everybody doing? Are you keeping up okay? Is this a good pace? Just pop a quick note in the chat box and let me know how you're doing with this. So I know that's a little bit lower value than I want. I'm trying to get it reasonably even, like a medium pressure. Then I'll change to the white. Starting to smooth it out a little bit now. So that's one layer of black and one layer of white. Let's check the value. Probably about right, but I want to get more chalk on there anyway, so I'm going to do another thin layer of black and then go over it again with the white. Oh, are you on the boat still, Titty? Kathy says, could you use the sandy pastel paper for this? I don't know what you mean by sandy pastel paper. I'm not sure. But if you, Kathy, the best thing to do is just to try it. Just to try doing a really simple scale. You know, do a value 7, a value 5 and a value 3, and then do your darkest dark and your lightest light and check where they are with the Munsell scale. And if you can get those nice and smooth, then yeah, it would work great. Still on the boat. I'm really impressed that you're managing to do it at all, Titty. Your background is running at a 4.5 and it looks too dark. Yeah, that's about a step too dark for your background, about a 5.5. So just go over it again with the white. Keep checking and rechecking. So I'm going to put a thin layer of black, very light pressure over this now. This is going to be too dark. But you can't get the smoothness until you've got enough chalk and charcoal on there. It takes a little while to build it up. And it is much easier if your chalk and your charcoal is sharp. At least reasonably sharp. So then I'm going to go over that in the opposite direction with the white. And at this point, I know I'm going to be hitting close to the value I want, so I'm going to try and make this as smooth as I can. So, I mean, the two kind of factors that you have to affect how this goes down are the speed with which you do it and, you know, and how hard you press. So if you do it very slowly and you barely press at all, very little goes down. You know, if you press hard and you move it quickly, then a lot more of the chalk will go down. Mine is a little bit lighter over on the left-hand side than it is on the right, so I'm going to even it out a little bit. A lot of it is just patience. It takes a little while before you see anything, but just if you trust the process, trust the values. I think that's right, actually. That looks just about bang on a value 5 to me, I would say, if I squint down. So I'm happy with that. Got about a value 5 there. I don't actually know what I've never come across sanded papers before. When I used to do big pastel pieces, I used to do them on canvas, quite rough canvas, but they were huge, you know, just like 12 foot by 12 foot or something like that. So, and I would use primed canvas and I'd work on the back on the unprimed side. So I'm going to go in like with my darkest dark in here underneath. So I've just sharpened my black and I'm going in just with black here, because this is going to be the occlusion shadow. And this dark line actually goes about this far around the egg, getting gradually thinner as it goes around, comes back here. And the interesting thing about it is it actually travels up the egg here. So if you look carefully, there's a dark edge of the egg against the lighter value of the cast shadow behind it. And it has a kind of it's almost an oblong, an oval shape. So I'm putting it in, and now I want to do a gradation into the reflected light. So I'm just working over the edge with increasingly lighter pressure. And then I'll work back into it with the white to get a smooth gradation there. I wondered that too, Susan, so I asked Titty, and it is Titty, on one of the times when we had a chat, I think over Zoom. And it's Finnish, isn't it? Titty's Finnish name. So I'm going to try and keep this value as it is in the reflected light there, and just manage a smooth gradation as I can without spending too long on it right now, although I'll probably spend longer on it later, into dark occlusion shadow there. It's quite a quick gradation, so it's almost really more like an edge, like a soft edge you're doing there. It gets very thin over on the left-hand side. This is one of the beauties of working this way, is that being able to control things this finely with paint is not quite so easy, you know, to do like really, really thin lines going almost to nothing. But working this way, it's not hard at all. So I'm gradually smoothing out my reflected light at the same time with the white, where I can see a couple of darker marks to try and get it even. How are we doing, everybody? Let me know how you're going time-wise. I think we're not quite at an hour yet, but just getting kind of close to an hour. Oh, poor old Nunu. Oh, no. Three teeth out. Poor little fella. Well, big fella, I should say. Jinya, you're loving this technique, aren't you? Susan, you make me laugh. It was quite an intense session, the rose painting session yesterday. But this kind of close focus that we do in this kind of work really sets you up for being able to manage that well. And we're going to also, don't forget, we're going to have next Tuesday, we'll have a critique session when we'll be going over these. And also, obviously, any more lemon drawings that you've done or anything like that, value scales, anything like that, we can go over to. That's going to be next Tuesday at the same time. I'll send out an email about it later in the week. Okay, I'm going to start just going into the next bit. So what we want now is we've got a value 2 here, right? And we've got a value 5 here. So we want to manage a gradation going down here, from here to here. This is a very gradual gradation, but there's almost like not quite a step, but there's a fairly clear difference here between the values. So it goes down very, very gradually, but it's quite a bit darker here. So I reckon we probably want to be about a value, probably about a value 4 here. Okay. So I'm going to get the black, and that actually goes, like, I'm going to imagine that this goes all the way down here like this. So I'm going to do all of this area as a smooth gradation, okay, from the core shadow down to the reflected light here. And I know that by the time we get down here, we want to be hitting about a value 4. So I'm going to start with that. Get something like around a value 4. So I'm going to put a band in, which obviously we're going to have to remove afterwards. but we need to make sure that we're hitting these values. It does get a little bit darker as it goes towards the back of the egg. But for now, I'm just going to try and put that in fairly smoothly. Layer of black. That's quite a bit lower than a value 4 at the moment. So then I'm going to go in with the white over that. So I'm thinking about, what values we want in general terms where for this gradation to work. Put those in and then we'll manage the gradation. So, when I was talking about in the crit sessions, practicing, and the homework was, getting a value scale done and then practicing transitions between the values. It's because that's the basic method for doing a careful gradation like this. This could probably go slightly lighter. So let's check that and see if I'm getting about a value 4 there. I'm going to have to get another one of these value scales. I've got paint all over this one, especially on the value 4. But that's looking about right for a value 4. We're going to try this and then we'll see. And then I'm going to do another band of value 3. So we're going basically 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to focus most of the gentle gradation from here down to here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want a definite difference here between the reflected light and the next value up. So now I want a value 3. I'll go in slightly heavier with the black, just a little bit more pressure, but it's not anything like as hard as like full black that I went in first to get the value 2. It's not that dark. Resolve the back edge of the egg. Not too sure about my drawing here of my egg. I may have to check that. Try and get that reasonably even. And then I'm going to go in with the white. So I want this to be about a value 3, this band here. Then need to bring it down a bit further. So this is looking, at the moment it's about the same as the 4. So I'm going to need to go over it again with the black. And I'm pretty sure that all of these values get slightly darker as they move back towards the back of the egg here on the right hand side. But we can do that in once we've managed the downwards gradation. So I'm going to go over that with black again because it's too light and try and get it close to a value 3. Trying to fill in any little skips. Decorators have a really nice word for when you miss a bit, like if paint doesn't cover properly and there's a little bit of something underneath showing through, they call it a holiday. Like the paint took a holiday and didn't cover. My value 3 took a holiday there and didn't quite cover everything. I don't know if they still use that word, but it's a traditional word they used to use. So let's see if that's about a value 3 I'm hitting there. A little bit dark. I'm actually 2.5, so I'm going to lighten that a little bit with the white. So I'm guessing where these values are going, Obviously there's an awful lot of refinement that goes into it once you get a little bit more of it done and that more of it is filled in. But if you can do an even gradation of a simple value scale, then you can do this, you know. And so overall that's looking pretty good. That looks like about a 3 now. Yeah. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to begin by bringing the 5 up a little way into the 4. And try and get an even gradation. I won't have the time, obviously, to finish this to a really high level in the session. I just want to show you like how I would approach this. Bring the 5 up, gradually decreasing pressure as it comes up into the value 4. And then I'm going to take my black and start to gently bring the 4 into the 3. This is going to go on a little bit too heavy just with the black, so I'll need to go over it with white again. I've been very impressed with some of the value scales that I've seen that you've been doing, though. I mean, basically, if you can do a gradated value scale like this, then you pretty much have nailed the technique, and then it's really just mostly a matter of patience. If you can nail the values and then do a smooth gradation between them. I'm going to use black to manage out from the 2 into. Need to sharpen this. Don't forget to sharpen. It does make it way, way easier if your charcoal and chalk is sharp. I know it's a pain to keep having to stop, but think of it like picking up paint on a brush, you know. If you do it with a point, it's much easier to control than if you do it with a blunt end, a blunt instrument. You have much finer control over how it goes down. Just tighten up this edge back here as well, and you definitely need a point for that. That won't work at all otherwise. Starting to come. So this is just using black to bring the 2 down a little into the 3. I want a smoother gradation here. I can see, like, looking here, there's a definite band here that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to come into this a little way with the black. And bring the black down. This is really, really light pressure, and the black is a sharp point. You know, at this point, you need to work really slowly and carefully and very, very light. That's starting to look more like a gradation now. And keep standing back and squinting and checking. Obviously, if you're sitting down, it's not so easy to do that, but keep squinting even if you're sitting down. If you can stand back and squint, then do that. Starting to come. Just needs evening out a bit more. Going to smooth that out a little bit with some very light white. Going back up into it. It's a lot of, I always think of it as push and pull, you know. Push it too far and then you pull it back. Pull it too far and then you push it back a little way again. Then gradually it does get there. And trying to keep an eye out, as we did with the drawing just with the Phosphene charcoal in the first couple of sessions. Keeping an eye out for any bits that stand out and trying to work with those. Darken or lighten them as you need to. Bit by bit, you cover the paper and you start to get the smoothness coming. And also we need to gradate out this way, obviously, but I want to manage this one first. Gonna need this to be down a little here. So I'm constantly checking against the reference photo to see, like, the particular area I'm working on, what would I guess that value to be? Based on the kind of the anchor points that I have. It's a lot like the approach that I generally take to values and color as well in painting. Like we mix the anchor points ready. I've got a bit of a band here that I want to take out. We mix the anchor points and then we use those as a base. As a guide to where everything else should go. So our anchor points here were our 2 and our 5, and then we went between them. So I've got a bit of an ugly patch here at the back that I'm going to go into a little bit with the white because it just doesn't look right there. So I'm just looking for things that stand out and don't really seem to be smooth enough. Come down a little bit more into my occlusion shadow. It's starting to come though, the softness is starting to come. Remember, a lot of what we're trying to do is just to get rid of any ridges, so it's just looking very carefully and seeing anything that looks like a band, a definite band, and then taking it out. So you need to be able to go from hard pressure, gradually lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter, That wasn't on this. Actually, wasn't on the camera shot. I'll do it again. So this is a good thing to practice. Go in with a hard pressure, and then gradually ease off the pressure as you move over to the right, little bit at a time. And you can, until it's almost like a whisper at the end, barely touching. You know, you need to be able to do fine gradations like that. You need that amount of pressure control. And it does take a little while to get, but once you've got it, if you don't feel that you have that yet, just practice it. It really is. It's wax on, wax off until it comes. And then when it's there, you'll find you will have way more control of a brush. So some of the little things that we were doing in the flower painting yesterday, flower painting session, a lot of that depends on pressure control as well. Where the paint is going on thicker and where it goes on thinner when you're painting, like with glazes like that. It's what I think of as a glaze. You put a couch down and then you paint partly opaquely and partly transparently. A lot of that is controlled just with pressure. And if you can do it with this, then you can do it with the brush. And it really is a skill that you can just learn. So if you're not happy with what you're getting at the moment, really just keep practicing. Just stick with it. It will come. Keep practicing those value scales. So this is kind of fairly typical of the amount of time I would spend on doing, trying to get an even gradation, if not more than this. I'm going to leave this one there because I want to move on, but I would quite happily spend quite a bit more time on this and getting those gradations even smoother than that. Okay, so how are we doing for time? A little bit over an hour, I think. So let's have a 10-15 minute break. And then we'll come back and we'll start to work over this direction of the edge, the egg, into the light. So we'll put down some patches of general values where we want them to go. And then we'll work the gradations in the same way until we've got the egg, pretty much established. Will you live long enough to finish the drawing? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Or will you live long enough to get the technique? Yeah, of course. Of course. The thing with this, the thing with practice, the most important part of practice to understand, I think, is that a small amount every day is way, way more effective. I don't mean it's a bit more effective. I mean, it's hugely more effective than doing it even like 3 days a week. If you can manage to do even a little bit as regularly as possible, I would say minimum 5 days a week. 15 minutes. Anyone can make that time, 15 minutes a day. Do it at least 5 days a week, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. And then just watch it happen. It just comes, In a matter of weeks, you'll master it. I don't mean you'll be all right at it. I mean, you'll master it. It's not that hard a skill. You can master it in a matter of weeks. And what you gain in terms of mental stamina and pressure control will help you with everything you do. This is what I believe anyway. I obviously I'm teaching you the stuff that has worked incredibly well for me. So, and I would like to say your mileage may vary, but I don't think it will. I think you'll find exactly the same. And the reason is because I don't mean to blow my own trumpet at all in this. It's because I've spent some time studying effective methods of practice. Because I'm largely self-taught and because I had to teach a small boy who had some serious issues, and I needed to help him develop his brain to do some catching up. I spent some time, I'm not an expert by any means, but some time learning about neuroscience, especially brain plasticity and how we learn things, how we develop skill. And, you know, this approach just works, basically. It takes time, of course, it all takes time. Ah, well spotted, Ginia. Ginia says it looks like the egg on the left is slightly darker than the one on the right. Is that right? Yes, it is. And the real challenge of this setup is if you can show that difference, because it's a small difference and you need to show it mostly in the light, on the light side, you know. The local value of the egg on the left is very, very slightly lower than the one on the right. If you can show that, then I'll be like extremely impressed, basically. I'm actually got into the zone now with this egg and I don't want to stop, but I know that we're going to need a break. So let's stop now for 10-15 minutes, have a cup of tea. Mariana, that's great to hear. The egg is growing. You nail those values, get the gradations, and it will work. It will work. Mariana says, are these brown eggs similar to the colour of the one you painted? Yes, they are. The one on the right is almost exactly the same colour as the one I painted, yeah. If you want, I'll post a colour image. I've got obviously a colour version of this, you know. Okay. Let's stop and have a break for a bit. Okay, so you probably just noticed when I refocused the camera, I forgot to resize the reference image, which is overlaid kind of over the stream. So now you can see that too. And it also, it makes, for me as well, because I paint from the screen when I'm doing like this, I kind of paint, I draw at least partly from the screen, if you know what I mean, from what I see on the screen. So this is basically kind of set up as a site size. Oh my word, Titi, that looks amazing. I'm so jealous. Wow. And not raining either, which is nice to see. I don't know Finland at all, but I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but my mother was on her dad's side. Her maiden name is Jansson, which I think is probably a corruption of Janssen, and she was Finnish. Her father was, apparently go back far enough through the ancestral tree, was Finnish. And I've always wanted to go there. Okay, so if I look at mine now, it's fairly obvious to me that this, now they're the same size, it's much easier to make comparisons when things are the same size, that my reflected light needs to go, this value needs to go higher up. So I'm just going to show you how I would make that change. You know, if you see that there's a similar kind of a change that you need to make. I'm getting my big head in the way of the camera when I sharpen my... So that would be like in a similar way that I did this, and I'm starting with a lightish pressure to begin with. I'll just gradually work back up. Gradually lightening the pressure as I get up. And really, it seems like the more chalk you have down, the easier it is to manipulate. Let's bring that lighter value up a little bit further. I feel like I've brought my dark value down too far and it needs to come up a little bit. I've got to be a little bit careful though, because the values on the photo are not exactly the same. I mean, as the photo as it is streamed are not exactly the same as they actually are on the actual photo, if that makes sense. Probably not. But so now I'm getting a bit of a band here, so I need to rework this a little bit. I have a feeling that this method may work best for people who are slightly obsessive. And you know, I've long held the belief that it's quite common for artists to be slightly obsessive people. Many of us are. Okay, I'm not going to play with this anymore. I really do want to play with it some more, but I also want to get some more of the egg in before I do anything else. Okay, so looking at the photo again, I'll do another quick screen share and some value checks. Oh, wrong one. So just to the left here of our core shadow, we're hitting like about a value 3, which is as we'd expect. By the time we've gone this tiny distance here, we've gone from a value 3 to a value 4. So that's going pretty quick. By the time we've come out to here, we're up to a 5, 5.5. So this gradation is going pretty quickly from a 3, 4, 5. By the time we get out to here, we're already a 6. Okay. Down here, it's like a 7. There is about a 6. So what that tells me is if we go back to looking at the drawing, By the time I get out to here, I want to shape something like that. And by the time I get out to here, I want to be hitting a 6. So around here, I'm going to be a 3. About here, I'm a 4. There, I'm a 5. And then this is a 6. So it's actually going out really, really quickly. Let me do those with black chalk so you can see them more clearly. Dedicated and devoted, much better words, thank you. Yes, let's call it that. Mariana, sorry, I realised that what you mean now by your egg is growing, you mean it's growing outways. Your egg needs to go on a diet. Yeah, that can be a little bit frustrating. You can cut back into it to an extent, but it can be difficult to cut back into like a very dark value with a very light one with this method. So around here, we want a 3, you know, and then by the time we get to about here, we're into a 4. By the time we get to, say, 3, 4, by the time we get to about there, this is a 5, and then by the time we're out here, we're a 6. So here it goes much quicker because this distance from there to there, so this is a 2 here, we're going to be at a value 6 by the time we get out here, out there. This is smaller distance. So our bands, if you like, need to be even finer here. So let's start by trying to get at like something like about a value 3 in. Going in with black first. And it's going to be, we'll see how it works with the reflected light because it does drop a little bit. The value does drop to the left. I have a feeling it's slightly lighter at the bottom, but let's go for about a value 3 in a fairly narrow band just on the edge here. So I've done like a narrow band of black and then I'm going to go over it with white. Chubby egg, oh dear. And it's going to take like a couple of goes going over with the black and then the white and then the black and then the white before we hit the 3. So this will go slightly above a 3 at this point. So hopefully you're getting that what I'm doing is I'm locating areas and trying to get the values for those areas. Reducing that down to a value scale, which we know how to do, right? And then putting in the value scale and then working the gradation into the scale. See, there is some thought behind what I try and get you to do. It's not all just for the sake of giving you incredibly difficult things to do. And if you're thinking ahead, you probably already have realised that I'm going to be asking you in a couple of weeks to do a painted version of the same thing. Not these eggs, I mean, although we could, but I mean the value scale, a carefully gradated value scale. And I know it's the kind of thing that you normally wouldn't do very much, but it will, those basic skills that you learn through doing that, they come out in everything you do. So the value of this band is definitely lighter when it gets to the bottom of the egg, affected by the reflected light. So I want to show this as being a bit lighter down here. Already I'm hitting at about a 3 here. So I'm fairly happy there with my value. But down here it's going to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to bring a little bit more pressure in and lighten the value. I'm not going to bother with any smoothing or gradation at the moment. I just want to get the values in. So we're probably like more like a 4 down here. You can see it's definitely lighter down there. So the next little value area I want to do is a 4. So we're going gradually lighter fairly quickly. This is another fairly narrow band. Get the black down first. And if these stripes are too obvious in a finished drawing, then it doesn't look nice at all. But they're a really good way to try and anchor your values in the right place, you know. So this, now I'm going to go over this with the white. This band wants to be very slightly lighter than the one we did before. Remember, you have your, if you've got the big book, either your Munsell chips or you've got the Paul Kentore value scale, you can check these values. This one wants to be about a 4. Slightly lighter. And again, I think it's going to be slightly lighter still than that when we get down to the bottom of the egg. So although in some ways it feels almost like cheating using a value scale like this, because it makes something so much easier, like getting the right values in the right place, it doesn't absolve you of the need to observe and draw what you see and to be able to see, observe and accurately reflect the differences that you see. So I'm not checking these values at the bottom of the bands here. I just know that it's lighter because I can see it on the reference photo. So up here, let's check, see what I'm getting. So I want to be about a value 3 here, probably a little bit light. So it's this area here. This is trickier to check because I'm just checking this area. Looking at that, that's slightly lighter than a 3, so I'm going to darken that one a little bit, which means that the one next to it is probably about right as a 4. And you can't really get them that even anyway until you've got a fair amount of, you know, at least I would say minimum 4 layers of charcoal and chalk before it's starting to get workable. Okay, that's more like it. A little bit dark, so I'll go a little bit lighter again. So I'm checking my value 3 band just as we're coming out of the shadow. That looks better. And it really is just a case of nailing them. That's good, that's a 3. So this one I want to be a 4. That's good, that's about a 4. But they're both a little bit darker here. So I want to make them a bit more even. Okay, so 3, 4. Now the next one I want in is a 5. Yeah, if you have the tags, the chips, the Munsell chips, they probably work slightly better than the Paul Kentore scale, but they both will work fine. So now I want to be going out to about here. I want a 5, so slightly lighter. And obviously this is like getting us somewhere in the right place, and there's going to be a lot of modulation and checking, and to be honest, if you're the obsessive type, endless editing. On an egg, I mean, it's like, you know, the one that I painted as part of the color challenge thing that I did, I looked at it the next day. I thought it went all right in the stream. I looked at it the next day and I was so disappointed with all the imperfections on it. Haven't been back to it since. But you know, eggs are tricky. So this is slightly lighter again. So I'm going slightly harder with my white, hoping to reach about a 5. So we want to be hitting like something like this value back here at this point. Maybe even slightly lighter. But we can edit as we go once we've got these basic values in. This is slightly lighter again, about a value 5. because by the time we get around here, at this side, we're on an 8. Again, slightly lighter at the bottom, although less so now, because as we move further away from the cloth, there's less of an effect of the reflected light off the cloth. Obviously, the further away you get from the cloth, the less effect there is. And don't worry too much if it's slightly rough. Try to get it reasonably smooth, but don't worry too much if it's slightly rough as you move around, because you know, we'll be going over it like multiple times again. So that's looking about right, because it looks like about the same as the value that I've got in my background here. I think they probably actually hit the same value slightly further back about here, but let's go on and see. And then I'm going to do a value 6 here, so I'm going to put the white down first for this one. Lighter value. Which I need to sharpen. So the basic thinking here is the same thing that I do in paint. You put the modeling factors in and then you blend between them. Good point, Kathy, actually. Kathy's saying I have the student book and using the matte finish chips is actually a big help. Yeah, because it will be very, very similar to, in finish, to the finish of the drawing. It's a good point. And also, it just struck me that I think when I did all of those value drawings, I think that was before I got the big book. So I will have used the student book for it as well. Okay, so that's the white down. What are we going for here? 6. I think I've maybe have moved up the value scale too slowly, and I'm going to have to lighten from the left in, but we'll see. So I'm going to go in with some black. It's going to be too dark at first, but you know, as I say, until I get, I say really 4 layers on, I don't have enough on there to be able to get a smooth finish. Down with the black and then back up with the white. To use quite a bit of pressure. I think I allowed a little bit too much black to get into it there. I think I might have judged the spot where it was at a 6 a little too quickly without enough careful checking, and it perhaps needs to be more like a 7 out there. Let's see what we've got out there anyway. That's lighter than a 7. That's a 6, so I'll bring it down again a little bit with the black. Sharpen my black a little bit first. So I'm using a light pressure, but I think this is going to bring it down a little bit too far, and I'll have to go back in with the white again, which I think will be, by the time I've done that, will be like 5 layers I've got on this, just this little band here. Oh, I need to sharpen my white. This is no joke about the sharpening. This technique is much more difficult to control if you're chalk and you get much finer control with a point on the end. Looking at these values now, I'm definitely beginning to think that I've moved up the values too slowly. So by the time I got to about here, where I am now, I should probably be a 6, maybe a 7, and I'm at a 7. Yeah, probably a 7, and I'm on a 6. So I can work back to bring the values up. But hopefully you can start to see that just at this point, we're beginning to get a suggestion of a curve of form. There's still a way to go. But there's a bit of a feeling of a form in space beginning to appear a little bit at a time now. So let's see what value I've got there. Lighter than a 6 for sure. I'm actually hitting a 7 there. So this band here is a 7. This is about a 5, I think. So I've kind of jumped 2 values, but let's bring up the photo again in Photoshop, because I just want to check how far over I should be with those values. I may be wrong, because it is extremely difficult to judge values by eye. So looking at this egg here, so I'm up to, on my drawing, I'm up to about this area here, and it is about a 7. So the 6 is about here, and the 5 is about there. So in terms of the drawing, I think I'm right, and I was right in what I was thinking, and I've gone too slowly up the value range. So here, this is about right as about a 7, which means that this wants to come up a little bit back here to a 6, and I want to be hitting a 5 about back here. So I'm gonna, for working the gradation, it depends what you've got, but I'm going to be working in slightly lighter this way to bring the values back up a little bit. And I'm also going to try to get away from doing all of the strokes. I want to get away from doing too much of this with the strokes. Obviously it's pretty hard to avoid to begin with, but I'm doing kind of a hatching now that I'm working back into it. So by about this point on the egg, we want to be about a 7. So our 6 is about back here. So I'm gradually bringing these values up a little bit with the white. Working back into it. I've got enough chalk on here now that I can do with light pressure, I can do very gentle gradations. I'm trying to work to remove any obvious bands or dark bits that stand out now. A quick stand back and look. Yeah, the form is starting to turn. You can feel it when it starts to come. And it can get so it's almost like you're kind of burnishing the surface. With the white especially, the black tends to go on fairly heavy. So I'm going to go through the edge about this point on the egg. There's a note that I'm hitting my value 5, 5.5 about here. I'm going to go right across the edge there. It really is quite a small amount of space to be going from a value 2 to a value 6 or to a value 7. The gradation is quite quick. It's narrow, I should say, is a better word than quick. Lighten this. And I'm going to start having a look at bringing the reflected light. So if you're following the same process as me, you should have a definite band here from your reflected light into the halftone. I'm going to start bringing that out into this halftone, bringing the white out to lighten it. Just looking at the reference, I think it's lighter down here. May need to change it. And there'll be a lot of to and fro still and checking and changing still to go. And I'm like looking at my drawing now, I'm getting a kind of a lump here where there's too much white. It's a value error that's looking like the form doesn't turn smoothly there. We're entering into the obsessive phase of trying to make sure that there are no value mistakes, however small, that make it look like there's a dent or that the form isn't turning smoothly. Go back in with a bit of black and then I'll come back with the white again. And you can see, hopefully now, there's very, very little of the paper showing through, because gradually as I'm changing and refining these values and the gradations, and more chalk and charcoal is going on there, and it's beginning to cover the paper, but it takes time. I think this can go up a little bit in value here. I'm literally whispering this on now. It's going on so light. Ooh. Do you want out then? How's that going for you? Yeah, don't forget as well with this stuff that what I'm hoping is that you won't just do this practice like over these 3 months while we're doing these drawings and paintings. You know, what I'm trying to show you is an approach and a method that you can take away and use more and refine and do over and over again with different subjects. Always. I still do value studies. When I get stuck and I feel I want to move forward and I'm not sure where to go, my default is to do value studies. I still do spheres, I still paint spheres. This is a painted one. When did I do this? June. I do a lot of this kind of stuff. And it really, this is like where we want to be getting to with the painted ones as well. And that one was done from life. And I always seem to find that when I'm stuck, if I go back to the basics and I check my basic skills and I work with values for a while, a way forward starts to come out of it, I guess. The point I'm trying to make is that this stuff never kind of goes away. These exercises are so foundational and so important. It's like, a musician never gets to a point where they stop practicing scales and arpeggios. If they're any good, they will continue. There's a really nice quote I've been quoting for years from Pablo Casals, a cello player. When he was in his 90s, he was still practicing scales and stuff. And one of his students asked him why he was still doing it, and he said, because I think I'm starting to see some improvement. Or something like that. Who knows how accurate these little things are. But okay, a bit of sharpening there. This is starting to come now. So I'm up to a value 7 in my lights. So obviously we've got the little highlight area here, about there, and that's going to be our lightest value. The rest of this isn't all the same value, but it's all about a value 8. Excuse me. Oh, little fellow wants back in. Hello. I know. So this is what we were talking about with the lemon, like the gradation across the light part, from the lightest part to the darkest part of the light is quite a wide band. And then the gradation through the halftone into the shadow is in a very narrow band. So the gradation is slow, 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 fast, 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 fast. And similarly here, we have a slow gradation down here. We have a much quicker gradation here. And getting those gradations right, like my gradation here is too quick. Getting in my reflected light into my shadow, getting is it confusing to talk about the speed of the gradation? How wide or narrow a band the gradation happens in? Getting those things right is really key to creating a feeling of form. If your gradations happen too quickly when they should be slow, then it won't show, you won't get the form. It won't appear to turn correctly. So, you really do need to get like a little bit obsessed about those things. And really spend a lot of time on thinking, what value where, in which patch, and have I moved up the value range or down the value range quickly enough, or have I gone too slowly? Makes a really big difference. So all around this area here, we want to be about a value 8. So let's go in with the white first. Try and do a reasonable eggish kind of curve. I'm not going to do the little highlight yet, because that is our highest value. It's about a 9, so we'll be doing that in white, but I don't want to lose it. I want to see that that's there, so I'm going to go in with that bit last. So I'm really just putting a layer down here of fairly thick, quite a bit of pressure, layer of white. When I go in with the black, I'm going to have to be very, very gentle, because too much black is going to be difficult to cover. It will inevitably mix. With everything that you put on afterwards, so try to be careful not to put too much black in. When we go over with the next layer, make sure it's sharp. If it's not sharp, it's much more difficult to control. Inevitably, you're going to lose some definition when the black goes in at this point. Just going to sharpen mine before I do anything else. And very, very lightly, I know you don't find this very interesting, but I do. Patting is more fun, right? Load fella, I got him a catnip toy the other day and he went mad for it. I think he got a little bit out of breath and surprised himself and had to stop. Mouse filled with catnip. But he still plays. And I always think, well, if they still play, then they're still happy. So I'm using really, really light pressure here, trying to just ghost this black on over the white. So I don't bring down the value too much. You can hopefully see that my charcoal is very sharp, the compressed charcoal, the black, and I'm just trying to do fairly evenly and just putting almost like hatching lines over the white. Just lost my focus and went too dark there. Because I know I need to be high value here, so too much black is going to be a problem later. Go back in with the white. Sharpen it first. And I'm going over it like in a different direction, and I just put those black strokes down so that they tend to mix more. Fairly light pressure again, because that allows me to go over it and kind of mix it. And then I'll check and see what value I've got here. I think the form is starting to come. I think this value may be a tiny bit light, which is better than going too dark, because that would be difficult to fix at the high end of the value range. Needs quite a bit of refinement still, but let's check the value and see where it is. So I'm looking for an 8. And I'm just about there, actually. That is about an 8. So that value is about right, which definitely suggests to me that, especially down here, these values need to be lighter going out of this. So I'm going to move back into the 7 with the white, bringing the 7 up, especially down this area towards the bottom where I think it's quite a bit lighter than I've got it. going over and over and over. I think most pastel painters would have paroxysms if they saw someone doing this kind of slow, maybe not, but slow, gentle work. And I think I also have a feeling that if you approached, I've never tried it, but if you approached colored pencils in this way, you could get some really beautiful effects, but you would just obviously have to spend a lot longer on them. So I think all this needs to be lighter down here, so I'm bringing this value up with the white. Now I'm going to move, because I think we actually only get to the value 8 like when we're right close to the highlight. So I'm going to go back, move back in with the black again, which I've conveniently lost. Where have I put it? Oh, I really have as well. Put it down somewhere. Could it be? I'm terrible for this. I'm going to have to get another one out. I've put my black down somewhere and I have no idea where. Let's just check this is the right thing. Sure, it'll be fine. It doesn't actually say on it what it is. It's fine. So this is obviously too dark at the moment as it goes on, but I'm going to mix white in with it again. So I'm hoping for something like just below an 8. Kind of like about a 7.5. Trying to manage a slow gradation out towards the highlight. This bit can be really time, well, I mean, you've all done this, this can be really time consuming, this part. think I'm actually going to bring down the exposure a bit, which I don't often do, just to bring these values into closer range. Photo there. And I'm going to bring a bit of the background value around the top of the egg here, so it makes it easier to see what's happening to the value there. Now there's a gradation here in the background as well, so actually by the time we get round here we'll be down to 5, like 4.5, because there's a very gentle gradation which is obviously going to be tricky to do from the right to the left. Well, not tricky, but time consuming to do. And it needs to be in this put in at this stage as well to an extent so that it works. You can only do one of them if you want to. I mean, obviously, all of this stuff is opt-in, you know, but I'm trying to show you more than anything else. I'm trying to show you techniques, and I mean, you know me well enough to know by now that I'm not really a tricks type teacher. I stress fundamentals a lot and basic skills and practicing those. And this is what I'm trying to give you is I'm trying to force you to practice to draw more eggs because they're so hard. They're not so much hard, but they're time consuming. You know, it's quite demanding of your values. You can't hide from an egg. You know, if the form isn't smooth and it isn't working, then it will show. It's true of also something like a lemon, but you can get away with a little bit more with a lemon than you can with an egg. So it's more time consuming. So I just want to get this value in there so that I can begin to gauge the values of the egg better, because once I'm kind of in about the right sort of area, you know, and we're using the Munsell value scale to get us into the right area. The refinements, it will only get you so far, you know, the refinements need to be done by eye. So I think my darker value here needs to come out into the egg a little bit more. So I feel like now I've overdone bringing the white in and I need to bring the black back out. Obviously, when you put the black down the first layer, when you put it down again, it overshoots slightly, so then I'll be bringing white back in again to bring it back. Trying to get this very gentle gradation, so we're really only hitting the 8 at like around this area here. But we've got to go from a 7 to an 8 across this whole area here. So that's a very gentle gradation to manage. Time consuming to draw, but entirely possible for all of you, given time. Come in with the white again, I'm going to sharpen it first. I'm going to bring in that white highlight now, mostly because it's looking weird to me to have a dark spot in the end there. So that's going to be like a value 9 is pretty much the highest value that you can get with chalk. But because the surface of an egg is matte, or kind of satin, I suppose you could say, it's mostly matte. That means the edges of the highlight will be very diffuse. So you don't have hard edges to your highlight, only on very glossy objects, very shiny objects, you have a hard edge to a highlight. So you need to put the highlight in, and then that needs to be gradually blended out as well into, mine is a little bit too far to the left, into the values around it of the egg. This egg is starting to come. It really is mostly just a case of not giving up, working very, very slowly, standing back and checking, you know, using the value scale to check when you're not sure. I'm just moving my highlight a little bit over to the left, so I've got to go in with some black and then some white again. So I find it always like if I bring a value down with the black, it usually overshoots, and then it needs to be brought back up again with the white. So I have a band here. You can hopefully see like the form is starting to come. The values are starting to look fairly good for this egg now though. So I think I've overdone the white here, and these values need to come down. And I have a definite band here in my egg, which I need to soften a little bit. So I'm into refinement stage. You know, it's covered now. I know that most of the values are pretty much in the right place. This shadow is about the right value. The light part over this side is about the right value. So I've got the extremes of the values of the egg. So I need to manage the transitions between them now. So this is all, I suspect, a little bit too dark here. So this all wants to come up. That's making quite a difference to how round the egg looks. I've got a lump in my egg down here, which is just the drawing. It's not very good there. Now it's starting to curve better. So I found definitely that at the bottom of my egg here, the values needed to come up quite a bit around this area here. And then I want to soften this gradation quite a lot around here. This seems to be quite a key part of the form. Beginning to come. I'm going to bring a little bit of the higher value in around here just to kind of help me sort of sculpt the outside of the egg there. It's difficult to see the edge. So when I get to this point, I do a lot of what I have always called the flick. So for me, like on the screen, I've got my drawing next to the photo. If you're working from a photo on a screen, it's a good idea to have it reasonably close to your drawing, so you can kind of flick between them and look for any parts that you need to change. Like if I'm looking at this egg now, I can see there's a lump here. There's a dent in the egg. There shouldn't be a lump there, and that means that there's a value mistake, and there's a bit of a lump here. So that's a value mistake. This is too light. So if I bring this down very lightly with the black and then go back in with the white, I should be able to resolve this value area here being too light. Once you get to this stage, it's like really light pressure. Very gentle. How are you feeling about your eggs? Do you feel like they're beginning to come? And that you can see that, you know, with some more time spent, you'll be able to create the form? In some ways, eggs are more challenging than spheres because they're elongated and fatter at one end than the other. So I've come up too far now with my value here, so I need to bring that back down. It's all the push and the pull of the little bits of, you know, the changes in the value here and there where they need to change. And I think it was putting in this very light value of the cloth against the egg helped me to see that that value there was wrong and a little bit too light. Putting in the black, it's going to overshoot a little bit, and then I'll go back in with the white. Pull it back again. So you can see that's obviously a value mistake that needs to be lightened again a little bit. Not too much. Coming. There's still a lot of work to do on this, just on this particular egg. And as I was saying before, when we were doing the lemon, like when I would do drawings like this, I would tend to work on them a bit at a time. On them for a while, a bit at a time, you know. Do an hour here, an hour there, whilst doing other things. I'm just putting in a little bit of the shadow here. I'm putting little values around the egg, which just makes it easier to see how the egg is working as a form. So this is all about, you know, what we want is to create the feeling of this form so that you could feel like you could almost reach out and touch it. And to get to that level with it, it does take a lot of practice, and it also takes a lot of time on each individual drawing. But it's the thing. It's the thing that cracks it all. You know, if you can do really, really good form like this, and get something like this to a point where it really does feel like you can reach out and touch it, then you can paint almost anything and have it look believable and real. And it's not the stuff that gets the attention. It's not the stuff that people want to do. But in order to do the stuff that you want to do, you need to be able to nail this stuff. It will just get you there much, much quicker if you can do it. Yes, it's time consuming. But if you're in a position where, and I think we all are to an extent, you want to be producing work that you're really proud of, that you can look at and you can think, wow, I'm kind of a little bit amazed that I did that. You know, and it's nice also when other people see it in your work too, and they say, wow, you've really come on, you know, I mean, seeing what you're doing now to what you were doing a couple of years ago. Frankly, this is the stuff that gets you there. Really focusing down and, sorry, I just realized I haven't checked the chat for a while. I personally find this kind of work extremely involving and find it difficult to to snap out of it once I'm started. I've been trying for about 5 or 10 minutes to stop drawing, and I'm struggling to do it because I keep seeing things that, and I think if I just change that, if I just change that. So the changes to the values that I'm making now are really subtle. I'm whispering the white on where I feel I need to, I'm over in the shadow now, where I feel like the core shadow is coming around a little bit too much, so it needs to be pulled back. So I'll just whisper a little bit of white over it there to help that form there. It's just push and pull and push and pull. And if I go too far, then I'll bring it back with some black and go over again with the white. Sorry, I'm just off now into the zone. It's like the tiny little corrections that start to make the form come. So hopefully you can see though, this form, I need to bring my reflected light up higher. This form is starting to come now though. It is starting to make sense. It's not quite there yet. I would want to spend quite a bit more time on this. It looks slightly, the shape is slightly out of my egg. So it looks like it's more of a blobby thing that you could press and it would move around. So it's not looking like a hard egg yet. I suspect part of that is the drawing. Like I've noticed now that this edge here should actually be coming more down like this. It's probably a difference of around 1 millimeter or so, but I don't quite have that edge right, and that's not helping. So creating a strong sense of form is you need the values and the drawing to be working together. They all need to be accurate. So I would also encourage you to be getting your tracing paper out and checking to see. Just check the form of your egg, check the outline, and if you need to make a few adjustments to it, don't be afraid to make them. I know I need to make some on mine. I'm guessing where they are at the moment, and I should really probably check to get them more right. You know the position of the highlight, everything matters in creating the form. So I've got a problem around here somewhere where the form is not looking quite right. I think that the top half of my egg is not too bad. That's looking egg shaped. The bottom half isn't quite, there's something going wrong around here. It might be my drawing. It might be that I've come down too far here. And I need to bring that up. It's probably values I'm drawing together that I need to change, but I can feel really more than see that something is out around here. I think maybe, a couple of millimeters out on the drawing somewhere can make the difference, like of it looking right and not. So there's a bit of work to do on this, but this is starting to come now. So hopefully you can see as well that the values that we established at the beginning were pretty much right. We're 2 here, we're down to about a 5 here, going up across here to an 8 around here, and then we're a value 9 on the highlight of the egg. So that's enough of the egg in. God, it's so hard to stop. Just keep seeing things that I know would make it a little bit better. And sorry, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to force myself to stop and catch up with the chat. It's at the point where the form starts to work. See, the light needs to come. I want to draw some more. I need to bring the light back further here, I think. But it's getting there. The values are pretty good. I would say, yeah, just looking at the comments about how to keep from smudging it. Like, if you've got your thing in a clutch pencil like this, you know, don't put your lead so it's like right in like that on the end and rest on the drawing like this. You know, you can have a bit more poking out and you can go hold it a bit further back and you can go in from the side. And then you can always get somewhere without having to put your hand actually in the drawing over something that you've already drawn. God, I'm off again. Over something that you've already drawn. You know, this is how I would do it, like work in from the outside. And also the pressure of my hand on the board is really, really light. It really is just to steady it. You know, I'm not leaning on it. It's and my hand is loose, really, really loose. I think that I perhaps haven't stressed that enough, but it's an important point that your hand needs to be really, really loose. You know, you're not writing, you're drawing. And in order to be able to control the pressure, to get the lightest possible pressure, you have to have a very loose hand. You know, if you're tight and constricted, you'll have much less control over what you're doing. Mariana, yeah, it's for your own good, yeah. Golf putter. I don't play golf, so I can't really say. But so looking at my egg now, the main problems that I have are form. So this curve here is wrong, and that's part of what's creating a bad shape. If I look over here, this is wrong. So I think this needs to be higher. So the highest point of my egg should be about here. And I've ended up with kind of a flat bit here, which goes to a bit of a point and then down again. So I know all this needs to be sorted out. But from a value point of view, if I squint down, I look like I'm getting fairly close now. Little bit lighter around this area, a little bit darker going in there, but it's starting to come. Okay. So the next job that I would do on my egg personally is I would try and sort out my outline. And there's no reason why you shouldn't while I'm here. I always have one of these. I've unfortunately left the lid off my pen. Hopefully it's still working. Not really. Kind of just about. So I always have a bit of tracing paper handy, so I can always check it, you know. So I'll just mark the corners because I've used this bit of tracing paper before. And you remember, you have to do this so that you can match it up with the printed version to see. I'll mark the center as well. And then here's my left point of my egg, my right point, bottom of my egg. And my top of my egg is here, and it kind of goes down like this. You know, actually, let's go all the way around the egg so we can just see how out I am and where the changes need to come. Okay, so I'm going to remove the reference image for a second because behind that, on my drawing board, I've got a printout taped, which I don't use for values because I don't trust the printer. So I use it. This I use when I'm just roughing out the shapes. And by the way, yes, sorry, I did forget to give you a version with the grid. So I've just put a central, vertical and a horizontal with charcoal over the top. So if I get my registration points in the right place over this drawing, I can see like what's out about my egg. You know, there's quite a bit. So it should actually be going. It comes out too much at the back. Actually, funny enough, this bit isn't bad, but then it goes too high here. So I need to cut off about 2 millimeters on the left hand side, and that's enough to spoil the form, you know. So if I put that back over again, I can see really clearly where I need to change my egg, you know. It needs to come in a bit at the back, which is going to be tricky because I've got a light value there. And it needs to come in a lot here. So I've got a big bulge in my egg here. Actually, the bit of the drawing that I thought was wrong here and here is actually pretty good. It's this part which is out. And it's only a couple of millimeters, but it's enough to spoil the egg. So I'm going to want to be cutting this down to about here. And that will also actually will sort out my little point in the wrong place at the top of the egg. And then by the time we get around here, I was not too far out, so it must be something like that. And funnily enough, instantly the values make more sense too. It's like instantly better. So, you know, don't be afraid to check those things and to change them where you feel you need to, because, you know, this is a good example of, I think, of what I'm always saying about it. You know, the form is, it's the right value in the right place, but part of it being the right place is the drawing out being good. So sorting out just that couple of millimeters, I haven't even sorted out the back of it yet, but this is where it was most out, here. And suddenly now it's, without actually changing any values, the values look better too. You know, the form of the egg is much better now. And some of what was troubling me about where the values were too light or too dark wasn't in fact anything to do with the values. Some of that was to do with the drawing of the outline of the egg, which wasn't very accurate and is much better now. So also don't forget to check your drawing. It wasn't too far out though, which is the interesting thing. I mean, we're only talking about a couple of millimeters there, but it's enough, you know, that's enough to kind of make it feel slightly like something is not quite right and something needs to be sorted. And this part of the egg is also working better now. This part still needs some work down here, but, you know, cutting down the drawing at the top there so that it's more accurate. Let's check it against my tracing paper again now and see if I made a good change. No, it's, yeah, it still needs to come in even a little bit more, I think, than I've moved it. Not very much, but it's still poking out a little bit too much there, so I could even bring it in a little bit more there. Small changes can have a big effect. So I need to sort out my background values, obviously, because they're not smooth now, so it doesn't look anything like as neat. But there we go, a good illustration of how important the drawing, the accuracy of the drawing is, as well as the values. You know, they work together to create a sense of form. And if you only have one without the other, then it won't work as well. So don't forget also to be continually, well, it's not continually, but ever now and again, check your drawing and make sure things that things are something like in the right place, and you'll end up with something that's much better. So now I can see, like, I've brought this out too far because my egg was 2 millimeters too far this way. This is going too far, and that needs to be darker. Okay. Okay. So I think we'll, I'm going to leave this session here for today. This egg is not there yet, but it's fairly close. I'll post it tomorrow in the group, and I do intend to work on this one some more. If you can get the egg to work well, the cloth will be fairly easy for you. Obviously, it takes just as long to do the cloth as it does to do the egg, if not longer, because you've got a bigger space to cover. But what I'm also going to do tomorrow is give you a picture of a version of this image of the egg, the whole drawing with the values for other areas superimposed as well. Like down here you need a value 6, over here you're going to be like a 5. And I'd encourage you to continue working on this a little bit at a time. Keep on, use the value scale to check your values. I just can't, you see, it's just the little things that you can see are wrong that you immediately want to start fixing. Too light here, just changes the form a little bit. Just bring that down and it will bring some more form into it. Check your values, use some tracing paper to check the shapes that they're in the right place. Don't give up, just keep on working on it. I'm going to try and be a good example and work this drawing to a finish as well. It's going to take weeks because I'm doing a lot of other things at the same time. But just if you can, keep your drawing board out, keep the thing there, and just, once a day or something like that, just sit down. If you can manage it, if you can make the time, sit down and do a little bit of work and just keep on working on it, trying to bring it. I'm actually lucky if I'm going to go to bed at all tonight. For me, this is the stage at which I start to get really interested, where the hard work is done, at least on this particular egg anyway. And when it gets into the refinement and actually making the thing really sing, like, I've got my highlight here and actually it should be down here. So even my highlight is in the wrong place because my drawing was out. Little bit obsessive, I know. But if you really do want to attain higher levels of skill of creating form and life, then this is just the best way to get there. So this is my highlight, should be here. I'm leaning hard into the drawing board there to get the highest value I can. Might actually need to rub some of that out, lift it off with the rubber. And I'm also rushing a little bit because I just want to do a little bit more on these little bits and see if I can get a little bit close. So the values were good, but my drawing was slightly out. And look what a difference that can make. Much more egg-shaped now. And it's also much easier to judge where the values should be, where the value changes should be. So now I can do a lot more kind of fine and gentle work on the value transitions to change those where I need to. Okay. So that's a lot closer now. And You know, it still has a little. I've deliberately used the textured side of the paper. You know, so partly just to show that even if you have like quite a bit of texture from the paper, if the values are good, and you can work a smooth gradation, then you'll still end up with, you know, a convincing form. Which is why you can paint quite roughly if you want to. But if your drawing is good and if your values are good, you'll still create a strong sense of form in your paintings, you know. So tomorrow I'll stick this up in the group as it is now, assuming I don't fiddle with it anymore this evening. I probably won't because I'm pretty tired now. And also I'll give you a version of the photo with value areas, numbers, like with the lemon, various areas kind of marked with the target areas you want to aim for, and then it becomes much easier to check, you know, how those values are working. I'm guardedly pleased with my egg so far. I can see some obvious things I need to change, but the values are pretty good. The drawing's closer now and we're getting there. Just stick with it. Keep on going. If you're not there yet, and if you're not completely tearing your hair out with frustration, then just keep making small improvements. It's like just a series of small improvements over time. And eventually you will get there. And if you can persuade yourself to work on something like this for the amount of time it takes to make a really finely finished drawing, when you come back to work more loosely again, you will be better. This is the path I took. And this is what I'm, you know, trying to share with you now. I will, Ginia, thank you. And thanks, Maya. Okay, so thanks very much for coming. Please do post your drawings at the stage they are at the moment tomorrow. Next Tuesday is going to be critique session, so we'll and also Q&A, so anything that you want to ask or go over, we can go over then. And I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.